It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Wayne Delker. He's the executive director of the Fung Institute, and he joined us after a long career in business and engineering management, most recently as the Chief Innovation Officer and Senior VP of R&D at Clorox. Prior to that, he worked at General Electric, Director of R&D for GE Silicones, and we are so glad to have him with us because his experience developing technical leaders in the real world who drive innovation and lead large R&D organizations provides a really valuable perspective in what we're doing here with the MEng program. Wayne?
Thank you very much, Beth. Now, when your team invites you to be number 4 on a list of introductory speakers, you kind of have to think about, well, how am I going to do something different? Well, it hit me. One, did you notice every speaker so far has complained about the weather? You notice that? Well, I spent most of my life with GE in upstate New York, Massachusetts, where there are 10 to 12 feet of snow every year. Let me tell you, the weather here is spectacular. It really is a wonderful, wonderful place. As Beth said, I come from a big company background. And it's what's kind of interesting as you listen to the 3 folks that have talked. Lee, incredible academic credentials in terms of what he's done. Coleman, incredible background in terms of starting up multiple small companies. I spent my entire career in large companies, and many of you are going to go into large companies. So it's kind of a nice balanced perspective. I also teach a course in the fall. It's one of the Lee referred to it. It's kind of a high-performance teaming and project management course. And one of the things I talk to the students about is this idea of beginning with why. Okay, if you can really ask yourself and answer why you're doing something, then the what, how, and where becomes very easy. So I actually encourage you over the next few days as you're making these decisions, really ask that. Start with why and then work from down. And I'm going to do that as well, right here. Why am I here? Okay, because that's really important to me. And the reality is I am here because of you. Okay? I truly believe in this room are the leaders that are going to shape the future of the world. And I just want to be part of that in helping you along. This is our mission that hopefully you've seen. We know that everyone in this room is a top quality, outstanding technical engineer, or you wouldn't be here, okay? You are in different places on your leadership development. Some of you have probably had some pretty inspirational leadership opportunities. Others may just be starting. Our job at the Fung Institute is to meet you where you are as a leader and to essentially transform and build upon your technical base to essentially make you a leader who can develop technical, social, and economic innovations. I have a tremendous passion, as my team knows, for this mission statement. And it speaks to me at 2 levels. One is the personal level, okay? In my career, I've had literally led organizations that had thousands of engineers in them. And I got to watch people. And what I often found, far too many times, is really smart technical engineers than scientists, because it really plays out to both, who do great work, but they really don't connect with the business in terms of understanding how that corporation works, and they really don't connect to people outside of the technical specialty. As Lee talked about, there's some communication issues sometimes. There's understanding how to be both a high-performing team member, but also a leader of high-performing teams. And what happens to these folks, and it's really tragic, is they top out. They go so far, and they can only go so far. They become a technical expert in an area, but they get trapped there, and they miss out on all of the big opportunities and the exciting things going on in the company. So our commitment to you is when you leave, when you graduate, you will be ready to go out and hit your career, start your career running, full speed. And one of the things you'll hear throughout the day is we're incredibly proud of our alumni. And some of our graduates are just doing incredible things, and we feel it's because of this background and balance they get between continued technical excellence, but also knowing how to lead and understand business. The second level, the second thing that's important to me about this mission is more at an organizational level. The world is becoming increasingly technical, very, very fast. And whether you want to look at it in the context of problems to be solved, things like climate change, energy, sufficiency of water, food security, cybersecurity, pandemics, whatever, we have major problems that will be solved by technology. Okay? On the other side of the coin is incredible opportunity. The world's knowledge is exploding. It's growing at an incredible rate. And the ability to understand how to tap into that knowledge and pull out learning and insight is incredible. In fact, even the nature of work is changing. You guys will not be working in an environment or doing things that's even similar to what I did in my career. And the folks that are going to solve those problems and shape that world are you. Our organizations need leaders, very, very strong leaders, as they always have, but these leaders have to also understand the technology and not be afraid of the technology. If you look at a lot of our corporations right now, the leadership group came up from different paths. Quite honestly, they're not connected with the technology as closely as they need to be and as closely as you are. So I'm going to conclude and get into some of the fun stuff, but my reason for being here is I want to help you become the best leader you can be, and then ultimately you go on and change the world. And that's a good enough why for me. So I hope you join us on this journey and come back and, we'll have a lot of fun next year. As Beth said, it's pretty intense, but it's never dull. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Alex Beliaev, who has the best job, I think, in Berkeley. He is the director of Capstone. I had his job until about a year and a half ago. And he has the opportunity to work with all of you on some of the most incredible projects that cut across all of our university departments as well as our corporate sponsors. So with that, Alex, the stage is yours.
Introduction. I very much feel that it's true. I do have the best job. Thank you. I love what I do, and I've been at the Fung Institute for the last 5 years. I actually joined as a graduate student instructor. I got my PhD here on campus in anthropology, focusing on youth leadership and peer-to-peer education. I was one of the faculty who designed the communications curriculum and the project management curriculum. And last year, I started directing Capstones. And you've heard a lot from Wayne, from Lee, and from Coleman, the importance of pushing your leadership skills onto the next level. So you heard the why behind leadership. And my role is to tell you a little bit more about the how. To kind of speak more specifically about how Capstone projects scaffold the development of your leadership skills. And as I'm going to talk about this, I will emphasize 3 factors that I firmly believe differentiate our Capstone program and our Capstone projects from what you may have experienced in the past. And these have to do with experiential, integrative, and team-driven learning. So let me start with experience. And I'm sure that a lot of you heard about the importance of experiential learning. And here, the theory goes something like this. You can only learn certain things by doing. If you want to learn how to ride a bike, it doesn't make much sense to read a manual. You actually need to team up with somebody who knows how to ride the bike and who knows how to balance, and you need their help to help you learn how to balance while you're riding the bike. So this is kind of the standard understanding of experiential learning, and it's not good enough for what we do here. Because, to go back to my analogy, there is no bike to begin with. Your task is to build a bike and then learn how to ride it. When we're talking about experiential learning here, we're talking about experience in a sense of experiment. You are working with your Capstone advisors not because they're experts who have the know-how that they want to transfer to you, but because they want to team up with you and experiment together in order to generate new knowledge. So this is the first key driver and a crucial differentiating factor of our Capstone program. The second one has to do with integrative learning. And this is something I'm also sure you've heard about. And generally, the theory goes something like this. It's really important not only to kind of go down a very narrow technical path, it's important to explore technical areas that are adjacent to your path. Or it's important to branch out and learn things like communication and project management. It's important to be well-rounded. And once again, I want to emphasize that we mean something slightly different when we're talking about integrative learning. When it comes to things like communication and project management, you can't do these things in the abstract. You know, if you're working on a data visualization problem and somebody gives you a practice data set that is easy to visualize, that's not nearly as challenging as when you are working on a capstone project without any sort of templates or any sort of guidelines and any sorts of examples of how to communicate it in a way that will resonate with audiences beyond your narrow area. Similarly, with project management, yes, there are books, there are techniques about how you can motivate your team in the abstract, but when you're working on your capstone project and you need to create a shared vision with your teammates, when you need to bring your varied stakeholders into alignment, it's very different. It is much more challenging, and it is much more exciting. And most certainly, it is much more valuable. So this is my second point about the importance of integrative learning. And my third one has to do with teaming. And I'm sure that most of you have experience working on teams. This is kind of the standard in engineering education today. And I want to differentiate between teamwork and teaming. In teamwork, you're typically working with a group of colleagues who are in the same class as you, with the same instructor as you. Most likely, all of you went to the same undergrad. You have your common ground. It's there before you even start the project. And things are not like this with the capstone. We have our class, I think Beth mentioned 40 different countries. A lot of projects are interdisciplinary, bringing students from 6 departments. A lot of projects will have stakeholders locally, nationally, and internationally. There is no common ground. There is no playbook. It is up to you to develop that. And that is very frustrating and immensely powerful. The kind of resonance that this has and the kind of skills that this teaches is what really accelerates your career forward. So these are the 3 differentiating factors: focus on experience, integration, and teaming. Now I want to talk about kind of the logistics. I believe that most of you have seen this diagram before. It's kind of the timeline. I think I also sent a message earlier today asking you to check out our updated project list. It will be continually updated up until July, and by the end of July, start of August, we're going to release project descriptions, and about 2/3 of you are going to participate in the Capstone Marketplace. Based on some of the conversations I had yesterday, I just wanted to share some data and emphasize the fact that while the process is competitive, it is much more competitive for advisors who are pitching projects than for students. About half of the teams that come out of the marketplace are interdisciplinary, and about a third are partner-led. I want to conclude and pass it on to our student panel. And as I do so, I want to share a challenge that I've been kind of grappling with together with Ashley. We're preparing for our end-of-year event. So if you're in the area, May 10th, 5 to 7, we're going to have the biggest party in the College of Engineering, showcasing the remarkable achievements of the graduating class. And I've been thinking about how to visualize the incredible diversity of projects that our students are working on. And fundamentally, my message is that the reason to come here is the ability to reshape the world. We have students who are working on what it means for us to be human. They're creating exoskeletons that are helping people walk. They're creating diagnostic tools that can help doctors diagnose irregular heartbeats. They're creating devices that will be able to detect neurological disorders based on retinal scans. We have teams that are working on projects that help the world run on AI-driven wireless communication, on new sensors for autonomous vehicles, most importantly for the Bay Area traffic. And of course, we have teams that are pushing the boundary of what it means to be on this planet. We have teams that are working on interstellar space missions, developing fuel that will be able to take us into deep space, or planetary rovers that will be able to navigate complex terrain. And this is why I think you ought to come here. The array of projects that is open to you is immense. The difference that you'll be able to make once you graduate is dramatic. And I very much look forward to living in the world that MEng students are helping to shape today. Thank you very much. With this, I want to pass on to Claire.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Very excited to have you all here. I'm Claire Trias, and I am the Student Services and Capstone Advisor. And we have a lovely panel of excited current MEng students here to speak with you about their Capstone experience. So I'm going to kick off the panel by asking a few questions, and then we will take some questions at the end. We have approximately 30 minutes. So let's begin with introductions. So starting with the student closest to me, please tell us your name and your department.
Hello, I'm Thomas, and I'm doing a Master's of Engineering in Bioengineering here at UC Berkeley.
I'm Kaila, Cappello. I'm in the EECS department, concentrating in data science.
I'm Reehan, and I'm doing my Master's in Engineering in IEOR. And I'm Kumu. I'm doing my Master's of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering with a concentration in controls.
So let's begin with our first question, starting with Kumu. Please tell us about your capstone project and what has been the highlight so far for you.
So my capstone project is industry-led with the General Motors, and essentially what we're trying to do is improve the energy efficiency of autonomous vehicles using a lot of optimization techniques. The highlight of my experience so far, I think, ties back to what Alex was saying about being able to really work in an interdisciplinary team where you're not really focusing on teamwork, but actually learning how to work in a team that's not just with people who are from your concentration, but getting your points across clearly and concisely to others that are also from different backgrounds.
Reehan?
So I'm doing my project with Ashurion, which is a company in the tech insurance space, and what we're working on is using natural language processing to identify user questions and to sort of develop a dynamic pricing scheme for them. And I guess the highlight of my project has been the fact that I'm, again, very similar to what Kumu was saying, which is I'm working with people from different concentrations in different countries, and I think that the biggest takeaway has been that I've learned so much from my peers, which is actually just fantastic, because not only is it integrated with the kind of work or the kind of courses I'm doing here at Fung, but also sort of the peer-to-peer learning is incredible.
And so I'm doing my project in deep reinforcement learning to improve traffic flow by controlling autonomous vehicles and traffic lights. And I think the highlight of my project is that we were given kind of more of like an open-ended topic, and we were able to design the project in the direction that we wanted to take. So being able to make it our own project and explore what we were more interested in, I think was a highlight for me.
And so if you've ever been to a hospital, you'll know that alarms are going off all the time, heart rate monitor alarms. And the issue right now is that 80% of these alarms are false positives, and that wastes a lot of time and money for hospitals, and it also threatens the lives of patients because nurses don't respond to these alarms anymore. They become desensitized to the urgency. So what we're doing is we're using machine learning techniques with UCSS hospital data to improve the heart rate monitors that they're using right now. And so the highlight is really that we're working with doctors and nurses to address a really pressing clinical need, and that's really exciting because we know our work can have impact. So that's what the highlight of my capstone is.
Excellent. Next question. And we'll start with Thomas in a moment. Please tell us what has been your most exciting teaming moment?
Me first?
Starting with Thomas, yes.
Okay, so hopefully now you can hear me. For me, the most exciting part, that's a tricky question. I'd say with any technical project, you get a lot of highlights because, you know, whenever your algorithm works, whenever you get results coming in, that's exciting. But that's probably true with every single project you've worked on, every single technical project so far. The Capstone project is slightly different because it also involves a lot of project management, managing different stakeholders, managing a team. And so for me, the highlight was a few weeks ago, we had a discussion with a few team members to try and understand how we had progressed so far. And we realized that if we were to start all over again, we'd do it completely differently. We made so many mistakes along the way, but we've really been able to learn from those mistakes. And so realizing just how much we had learned and how much we had progressed, that's the highlight of the project.
For me, so my team, we have weekly meetings, and every other week we'll get a team lunch before the meeting, and I think it's really good for us to be able to get to know each other outside of the project, and I think it helps us work better together. And anytime someone has something to celebrate, like a birthday or a job offer, or one of my teammates got into the PhD program, we always celebrate with like a cake or something, and I think it's just nice to celebrate each other's successes, and I think it helps us work better together as a team.
I think my highlight happened in the initial phases of the project because, so again, like I mentioned, we were working in a team that's spanning across different countries and different concentrations, and to sort of break that initial ice was really difficult because you really are in that sort of, weird spot where you don't really know your team and you still have to work really intimately with them. And I remember that we used to have like weekly brainstorming sessions, which would be about 45 minutes. And this one time, we just started hitting it off and sort of bouncing ideas off each other, and a 45-minute meeting ended up becoming 3.5 hours. And we had to sort of end that because all of us had class and we had to go, but I'm sure it would have gone on for longer. And I think this was really one of the first times that we sort of realized the value of working with people from different parts of the world who are all specializing in different things. And this really sort of got all of us a lot, I mean, it got all of us together and helped move the project along. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
For me, I think I would say what the highlight was basically being able to be a part of something where you're changing and shifting the paradigm of what the norm is right now. So there's a lot of research with autonomous driving about how it can improve safety and time efficiency, but energy is something that hasn't been really looked into, and being able to work on something that is something new and could potentially impact a lot of future research has been something that's exciting for me and my team. And basically being able to see, like when your code starts running and you're one step closer to being able to, present to these industries that there is potential in autonomous driving, improving energy efficiency. That's been something that's been really exciting for me and my team, I would say.
Excellent. Last question for the panel. How did your Capstone project help integrate what you learned in the program? What are your takeaways? Let's begin with Kumudra.
So with coming from a concentration, so in my team, I am actually the only mechanical engineer. I have a team of 6. 4 of us are from IEOR, and then, sorry, I lied, there's 2 of us. There's one from mechanical engineering, but he's from energy, and I'm from controls. So coming in with controls, I've been able to use a lot of optimization techniques and really just work with a lot of actual GM employees in order to see how controls is actually used in the real world on cars that are actually running on the streets right now. But other than that, just the leadership courses have been really, really useful in just being able to kind of navigate where your project is and how you're going to work with these actual industry partners. So it all just comes together. It's like a big puzzle that comes together at the end.
I mean, yeah, I probably can't agree more with what Kum was saying, which is that I think that the technical courses that I did as an IEOR student really helped me sort of make that base in just Python coding or natural language processing, and it just sort of gave me that strong fundamental to build on when it came to doing advanced things in the project. And on the other hand, we had some incredible courses like teaming and project management, which really sort of brought together elements of how to deal with problems. And this is actually something that you really don't see when you're working on short-term projects in smaller teams. But when you're working on such a long-term project with people who are stakeholders at Fung, your fellow students, your industry stakeholders, it's really I guess the whole amalgamation is really, really good because it sort of takes you through each and every step of the process in a very structured manner. And a lot of times you don't realize the value at that point, but right now it's really all just coming together. So yeah, that's been fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you. I would say first it's being able to apply the technical knowledge that you're learning in classes to an actual problem, I think is really valuable. And then second, I think that the teamwork aspect is also very important. The leadership courses place a lot of emphasis on teaming and project management. And I think that's really crucial skills because I think once you graduate from this program, you're pretty much always going to be working in a team. So I think it's really, really important to build up those skills and get practice working on a long-term, which could be stressful project.
Yeah, to be honest, there's not much to add. I totally agree. The teaming courses are really important, especially when things aren't going that well. It helps you take a step back, analyze the situation, and act accordingly. The one thing I maybe would add would be that you do have a lot of technical courses and management courses which do relate to your capstone, but that doesn't mean your capstone can't be something completely new, something you want to explore, you want to develop a new skill. That's the perfect opportunity. The capstone is there for you to learn something new. And typically, I'm a bioengineer. Before arriving at Berkeley, I'd never done any machine learning, although I had coded quite a bit. And right now, I'm doing a capstone on machine learning. That doesn't mean I'm an expert, but it means that I've been able to develop this skill only via the capstone. And that's something that's really a unique opportunity and something that you might not get elsewhere if you compare that to a research assistant position where you probably have to have more experience, and it's less about developing a completely new skill.
Excellent. So we will now transition over to Q&A. So we have about 15 minutes. When you ask your questions, feel free to ask the panel or ask a specific person. So who is our first question?
I have one over here.
Yep.
So this is sort of going off your last point when you mentioned learning a new skill. How much of the Capstone project is in that initial phase of trying to figure out the new stuff, and how much is actually implementing and prototyping and building the code for your case code, I would guess?
I guess that really depends from one project to another. In our case, we spent a month, 2 months reading the literature, learning as much as we could via online courses on Coursera, also going to courses at Berkeley, who's got fantastic resources. So you get as much time as you want to really come to grips with the specific problem. And once you feel ready, you can go out and start coding. But I think that's really specific to each project. The timing depends also on your past experience and how committed you are, because of course the more time you spend on the capstone, the faster you're going to learn. So it depends.
All right, and the admin's asking questions. If you can tell us your name and your department, that would be great.
Next question.
All right, my name is Aiden. I'm a mechanical engineering student. And I guess for the panel, how are capstones typically funded? If you need a chunk of hardware to test whatever, does the industry partner pay for that? Does the university pay for that? How much are they willing to pay for?
Okay, well, I can take that. So I guess, again, very, very specific to your project. If you're doing it with the industry, you typically expect that sort of funding to come from the industry partner. So I know a few friends of mine who are doing projects with cryptocurrency, and they've actually been given a bunch of money to just go out there and buy Bitcoin, right? So it's incredible. They don't own the Bitcoin, of course, but I mean, and in some cases, when it's a faculty-led project, then they'll typically have some sort of funding or a budget that they can allocate. But yeah, it really depends on your project. I think, though, for most part, at least for the exploratory phase, you're relying on like free resources you can find online. So, for instance, if you're doing something in machine learning, you can probably get like AWS credit or something. So yeah, I mean, Fung will always figure out ways to help you out in these cases. But yeah, I mean, it's really dependent on the project.
And just to speak from like the faculty-funded project, so I'm kind of, for EECS, we're paired with like a research advisor who has a whole lab of PhD students. So they have kind of their own funding for that, which they allot some for the capstone. So we are able to use AWS credits and stuff like that.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Patrick Savage. I'm admitted in the civil engineering department and transportation engineering specifically. Also regarding your capstone projects, and this is kind of related to the question just asked, were these projects your guys' individual ideas and you proposed them to other people, like other fellow MN students, and everyone was like, let's get on board? Or were these ideas cultivated with a professor? Or how did these projects start is kind of the question. Kind of to everybody.
Open.
Address to everybody.
I can start. So for my team, so again, I'm in like a research lab with a research advisor, and he kind of has like a breadth of topics that his lab focuses on. So we were kind of able to like pick kind of what we wanted to work on in this like overall deep reinforcement learning with traffic applications kind of like bucket. So we kind of designed what we thought would be most interesting, what we thought we would get the most meaningful results from. So that's kind of how our project started.
Yeah, on the other hand, so I'm doing like a industry-led capstone, and so I think similar to what Alex mentioned earlier, you have this whole marketplace, like a capstone fair, where people, like industry partners, they come down and pitch their projects. So it can depend on, I mean, when you get the info, you'll actually know whether it's a super specific, like, or super narrow domain, or it's really open to interpretation. And in both of these cases, you usually just get like a broad problem statement, and then working within that, you have as much room to maneuver as you want with regard to what you want to implement or how you want to go about doing it.
Yeah, so like for instance, in my capstone, we had the overarching theme of energy impact of connected and autonomous vehicles. And after the team was formed, we basically sat down together and we were like, what exactly is it that we want to investigate and look into regarding this topic, and how are we going to go about it? The project was actually continued from last year, so we had a lot of room to actually build upon what last year's team had done, but obviously there were a lot of things that we didn't agree with or we thought could be done better, so we've been refining and redoing a lot of the things, but I think it really depends on your project and like how your advisor sees the plan going forth.
Next question.
Test. Just make sure.
Thank you. My name is Joey Liu, and I'm coming into the EECS department. So coming into this M Engine program, I think everyone is looking for professional development. So job hunting is on everyone's mind, and especially since the 1-year program, I'm wondering also because like all the courses and the senior design seems to be a lot of time commitment. So how do you balance between trying to find a job and what do you do at school?
Open to the panel.
Open to the panel.
Yeah, that's a great question. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes you get a lot of deadlines, projects, and stuff, and so at that point, your job search won't be as easy as what you had planned. But generally speaking, most people do end up finding a job at the end of the program. So it is possible. It definitely is possible. And the Fung Institute and Berkeley as a whole has a lot of resources to help you out. You've got a number of career fairs. You've got alumni brunches where you can find, well, either contacts into certain companies or they can share their experience, tell you what kind of companies they apply to and who's hiring. So it is clearly possible. So in some fields, it's easier to find a job early on in the process, well, especially if you want to do consulting, for instance. I think it's in October, November, so you'll get that out of the way really quickly. If you're more into the startup world, that's happening right now. So it really depends. There isn't any set timeline, but if you want to find a job here, you can definitely find a job.
And I mean, I think just to build on that, I guess just a general piece of advice I can give you is that start as early as possible. So, I mean, of course, especially for me, I didn't really know what kind of job I wanted when I started the program. But what really helped was that because Fung provides you with so many opportunities to connect, and Berkeley as a whole is sort of very inclusive in that sense, just reaching out to alumni or going out to these career fairs, even really, really early into the semester, even when you don't know what you really want, just sort of building these initial connections is really going to go a long way into when you're actually sort of in that grind and looking for a job. So I think that planning a little early just to sort of start networking, and I guess it was a little difficult for me as an international student because the kind of culture for like looking for jobs is very different like in India where I come from. So just getting that out of the way really early helps. So I mean, yeah, and just do as many interviews as possible because that's probably the best way to prepare for any job search.
We had another question. Also remind you that we'll have a student experience and career panel later in our agenda. So if you want to ask specifically capstone questions, this is a great time to do that.
Hi, I'm He-Kun from Material Science and Engineering. So I have a question about how your technical electives fit into your capstone project and whole program. So for example, if you find out that you need to learn something more, can you choose like different courses, or like are your courses and capstone projects very separate and like nothing is helping each other?
I think it definitely depends on your project. But I think the program is pretty flexible in that you can kind of pick and choose your courses and do what you're more interested in, and there's probably definitely courses available that would align well with your capstone. For me, we had like a very specific course that was actually kind of geared like for my capstone, which was really awesome. So we kind of built a foundation in that class that we were using that kind of knowledge for our project.
Just a question from here. My name is Alan, and I'm from IEOR. So I was talking to an alumni in IEOR of 3 years ago, and he was working on a capstone project that actually leads to a startup. And he said he actually quit the team. He didn't join the startup later on, but also the startup actually is raising a round B investment. So I was wondering, like, when you're choosing between different capstone projects, what part of what's the portion of the project that is like entrepreneurial instead of like under very specialized company context? And also, especially since I'm coming from IEOR background, and I heard that IEOR students actually work with ME students a lot. I'm wondering, like, so since you're like
Kumai and Reehan. So I'm wondering about experience of you working with each other. Like, how do you collaborate between different, and what advantages and like the ways that you collaborate with each other? Thank you.
So I guess when it comes to like entrepreneurial ventures, if you're typically doing a project with an industry advisor, there's not as much room for sort of building it off into your own project, because at the end of the day, you're doing it for the company. So I guess it's kind of limited in that sense, but I'd still say that the kind of things that you learn are probably really useful for you to start things on your own if you want to. I know at least a couple of people in the program who are actively working on their startups or sort of developing an idea for their companies right now. And what most of these people say is that the Capstone really helps with this because it gives you like a really good exposure to what's happening in the industry. I'm not sure about what it's like with like faculty-led projects and if there's more room for entrepreneurship there. But yeah, I mean, especially in the collaborative sense, I think that just the whole idea of there being like 400 engineers in the program really helps with sort of this whole environment. And I think that the best part about the MNs that I found was that it's more focused towards sort of getting out there in the industry and, I mean, developing these kind of ideas that sort of shape the future, right? And that's what people are looking for out of entrepreneurs, so yeah.
My name is Vikash, and I was admitted for bioengineering. And so my question is, Kumu mentioned that for like the open-ended capstones, you can kind of talk with your team to discuss what the focus of the project will be. And so if you don't exactly have a good idea of what the scope of what you want to do is, will advisors step in if they think that it would take more than a year or if it isn't really possible for a small person team in the span of the time that you have?
Yeah, definitely. So my team, we were working with a PhD student in the lab who had a lot more knowledge than us. So we would meet with him regularly, and we were able to bounce off ideas with him. And he kind of helped us with the direction a lot, because a lot of, I think, what we wanted to do was way too time consuming and way too aggressive for us to try and tackle. So yeah, you get a lot of advice from either your advisor or someone else who they appoint that can help meet with you regularly.
Yeah, and I mean, just to sort of cap that off, the whole feedback loop with like your advisor is really, really tight. So, I mean, for instance, I have like a weekly meeting with my advisor, which is like an hour and a half long. And we just sort of go through, hey, these are some of the ideas we have. And so it's usually not restrictive, but they'll give you a very good idea, because they've been working on similar projects in the past, they'll give you a good idea of, hey, I think that this might take more than the 3 weeks that you're proposing it might take. So, I mean, you can both get like feedback on smaller chunks of the project and also like on long-term things, both in terms of time and resources.
And I think it's important to remember that it's not only you that's going to gain something from this. The industry partners or like the people you're working with are also expecting results, and they want to be able to, you know, walk away at the end of this year and say this team really gave us something at the end of it. So they won't really, if you're going astray, they will definitely pull you back just to make sure that they're also getting the results that they need. So I wouldn't be too worried about, you know, not being too structured. Yeah.
Thank you. John Guidaboni, Mechanical Engineering. Question for the whole panel. How many of you brought prior work experience into your program? Maybe also talk about your team members. And how did the Capstone experience build upon that work experience?
So for me, I came with 5 years of project management consulting experience. So I think the project management helped a lot in helping to structure the project and to help us keep us on track. So I think that was really valuable. And also, because it was more of an open-ended thing, it allowed us to kind of like, you know, like design the project and develop processes that we wanted to follow ourselves, which was a really cool experience. And then for my team members, a few of them do have a couple years work experience. One actually has his own company that he has in France. So yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good mix of like people with work experience and people coming straight out of undergrad.
I think my team was the other end of the spectrum. There's 4 of us, and we have literally no experience. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe like a couple of internships was probably the most that all of us had. But I think that in that sense, I believe that the Capstone has been the most valuable thing, because it's industry experience before being out in the industry. Like I'm able to get all of those project management skills. And I think that the biggest takeaway for me is that I've never really worked on a long-term project before, which sort of goes past like 6 months. So that's really, really been good. And I think that when it comes to that, our feedback loop with our advisor has been a little tighter in that sense, because we're constantly sort of seeking advice on fine-tuning our project plan or like our broad goals. Because I mean, yeah, it really helps, and you sort of get that leeway where if you have experienced people on the team, then you can take up some of those responsibilities on yourself. Whereas if you need help, then there's both the industry advisor and the Fung Institute that's more than happy to help.
Yeah, our team was a bit of a mix. Basically, we're nine. I think 3 people have prior experience, about 2 years each, in project management or consulting. And the rest, yeah, only internships and sometimes not even that. So a bit of a mix, but it's really useful. And I totally agree with you, what you were saying, Reehan. Like, the Capstone is basically your sandbox. It's your opportunity to make all the mistakes that you don't want to be making in the real workplace, in the real world. So go out there, try things. Some of them will work great, some of them will completely fail, but at least you'll know that, and there aren't any consequences. The worst that can happen is, oh, you just didn't deliver on what you had expected to deliver, but you'll have learned a ton along the way, so don't worry about it.
So these are all great questions. We are out of time. Let's applaud for our wonderful panel.